Hi guys, so I'm going to try the second part with a different app and the camera on my computer because when I recorded my lesson on my reading on Zoom the first time, it only recorded my voice. I don't know what happened. I'm still getting used to all this. So I'm going to start the second part of chapter 7. I'm starting on midway through page 208. So they had just made the decision to let the goat herds go and kind of realizing that they might regret that decision. So here we go. We packed our stuff, and right there in the noonday sun, we watched the goat herds far from the horizon finally disappear from view. By my watch, it was precisely 19 minutes after their departure, and the mood of sheer gloom enveloped us all. We set off the mountain, following in the hoofprints of the goat and their masters. We moved as fast as we could, but it took us between 40 minutes and 1 hour to cover the same steep ground. At the top, we could no longer see them. Mountain goats, mountain herders. They were all the goddamn same, and they could move like rockets up in these passes. We searched around for the trail, and we arrived at it, found it, and set off back towards the initial spot, the one we had pulled out of because of the poor angle in the village and those dense fog bank. We tried the radio and still could not make connections with home base. Our offensive policy was in pieces, but we were headed for probably the best defensive position we had found since we got here, on the brink of the mountain wall, maybe 40 yards from the summit, with tree cover and decent concealment. Right now, we sensed we must remain in strictly defensive mode, lie low for a while, and hope the Taliban had been alerted, or had not been alerted, or, if they had, that we would be too well hidden for them to locate us. We were excellent practitioners of lying low and hiding. We walked on alongside of the mountain, and I have to say the place looked kind of different in broad daylight, but its virtues were still there. Even from the top of the escarpment we would be damn near impossible to see. We climbed back down and took our precise old positions. We were still essentially carrying out our mission, but we remained in the highest possible alert for Taliban fighters. Below me, maybe 30 yards to my right, looking up the hill, Danny slipped neatly into his yoga tree cross-legged, still looking like a snake charmer. I got myself wedged into an old mulberry tree, where I reapplied my camouflage cream and melted into the landscape. Below me on the left, same distance as Danny, was Axe with our heaviest rifle. Mikey was right below me, maybe 10 yards, jammed into the lee of a boulder. Above us the mountain was nearly sheer, then it went flat for a few yards, then it angled sharply up to the top. I tried looking down from there, so had Murph, and we all agreed you could not really see anything over the small outward ridge which protected us. For the moment we were safe. Axe had the glass for 20 minutes, then I took over for 20 minutes. Nothing stirred in the village. It had now been more than an hour and a half since we turned the goat herds loose, and it was still quiet and peaceful, hardly a breath of wind, and by Christ, it was hot. Mikey was closest to me when he suddenly whispered, "Guys, I've got an idea." "What is it, sir?" I asked, suddenly formal as if our situation demanded some respect for the man who must ultimately take command. "I'm going down to the village, see if I can borrow a phone." "Beautiful," said Axe. "See if you can pick me up a sandwich." "Sure," said Mikey. "What'll it be, mule dung or goat's hoof?" "Hold the mayo," growled Axe. The jokes weren't that great, I know, but perched up there on the Afghan rock base, poised to fend off the attacking army, I thought they were only just shy of grade 1 of hilarity. It was, I suppose, a sign of nerves, like cracking a one-liner on your deathbed, but it showed we felt better now, not absolutely A-okay, but cheerful enough to get our work out and toss out the occasional light remark. More like our old selves, right? Anyhow, I said I was just going to close my eyes for a short while, and I pulled my camouflage hat down over my eyes and tried to nod off, despite my pounding heart, which I could not slow down. Around 10 minutes passed, and suddenly I heard Mikey make a familiar alert sound. "Sst, sst." I lifted my hat and instinctively looked left, over my portside quarter, to the spot where I knew Axe would be covering our flank, and he was right there, rigid, in firing position, his rifle aimed straight up the mountain. I twisted around to look directly behind me. Mikey was staring wide-eyed up the hill, calling orders, instructing Danny to call in immediate backup from HQ if he could make the radio work. He saw I was on the case, looked hard at me, and pointed straight up the hill, urging me with hand signals to do the same. I fixed my Mark 12 in firing position, pulled back my head back a few inches, and looked up the hill. Lined along the top were between 80 and 100 heavily armed Taliban warriors, each one of them with AK-47 pointing downward. Some were carrying rocket-propelled grenades. To the right and to the left they were starting to move down our flanks. I knew they could see past me, but not at me. They could not have seen Axe or Danny, and I was unsure as to whether they had seen Mikey. My heart dropped directly into my stomach, and I cursed those fucking goatherds to hell, and myself for not executing them with every military codebook ever written had taught me otherwise, not to mention my own raging instincts, which had told me to go with Axe and execute them, and let the Liberals go to hell in a mule cart and take with them all their fucking know-nothing rules of etiquette and war and human rights and whatever other bullshit makes them happy. You want to charge us with murder? Well, fucking do it, but at least we'll be alive to answer it. This way really sucks. I pressed my back against a tree. I was still sure they had not seen me, but their intention was to outflank us on both wings. I could see that. I scanned the ground directly above me. The hilltop still swarmed with armed men. I thought there were more than before. There was no escape by going straight up, and no possibility of left or right. Essentially, they had us trapped, if they had spotted us. I still was unsure. Sorry, the dogs are barking. The garbage truck is here. But it's gone, so Max will stop in a second. And so far, not a shot had been fired, and I looked up the hill again at one single tree above and to my left, maybe 20 yards away, and I thought I saw movement. Then it was confirmed, first by a turbine, then by an AK-47, its barrel pointed in my general direction, though not directly at me. I tightened my grip on the trusty rifle and moved it slightly in the direction of the tree. Whoever it was still could not see me because I was in a great spot, well hidden. I kept perfectly still. That's goddamn motionless, like a marble statue. I checked on Mikey, who had not yet moved. Then I checked the tree again, and this time the turban was around it. A hook-nosed Taliban warrior was peering straight at me through black eyes above the thick black beard. The barrel of his AK-47 was pointed right at my head. Had he seen me? Would he open fire? How did the Liberals feel about my position? No time, I guess. I fired once, blew his head off. And at that moment, all hell broke loose. The Taliban unleashed an avalanche of gunfire at us, straight down the mountain from every angle. Axe flanked left, trying to cut the downward trail, firing nonstop. Mikey was blasting away straight over my head with everything he had. Danny was firing at them, trying to aim with one hand, desperately trying to rev up the radio with the other. I could hear Mikey shouting, Danny, for Christ's sakes, get that fucking thing working. Marcus, no options now, buddy, kill 'em all. But now, with enemy gunfire seemed to center us on our flanks, and our two flank men, I could see the dust and rock shards kicking up all around, the sounds of AK-47s absolutely filling the air, deafening. I could see the Taliban guys falling all along the ridge. No one can shoot like us. I stayed right where I was, in my original position, and I still seemed to be taking less fire than the others. But in the next couple of minutes, they had identified my position, and the volume of fire directly at me was increasing. This was bad, very bad. I could see Axe was acquiring his targets quicker than I was because he had an extra scope. I should have had one too, but for some reason I had not fitted it. Right now, all four of us were really amped up. We knew how to conduct a firefight like this, but we needed to cut down the enemy numbers, nail a few of these bastards real quick, get ourselves a better chance. It was hard for them to get us from directly above, which meant the flanks were a danger. I could see two of them making their way down, right and left. Axe shot one of them, but it was bad to the right. They were shooting in kind of a frenzy, but thank Christ missing. I guess we were too. And suddenly, I was taking heavy fire myself. Bullets were slamming into the tree trunk, hitting rocks all around me. The bullets were somehow coming in from the sides. I called down to Mikey. Well, we'll take him, but we might just need a new spot. Roger that, he yelled back. Like me, he could see the speed at which they were moving it up into attack. And we were shooting them for all of 5 or 6 minutes, but every time we cleared the ridge high above us, it filled up again. It was as if they had reinforcements somewhere over the ridge, just waiting to come up to the front line. Whichever way we looked at it, they had a ton of guys trying to kill 4 SEALs. At this point, our options were non-existent. We could still not charge the top of the mountain because they'd cut us down like dogs. They had us left and they had us right. We were boxed in on three sides, and there were never, not even for a couple of seconds, a lull in gunfire, and we could not even see half of them or tell where the bullets were coming from. They had every angle on us. All four of us just kept banging away, cutting them down, watching them fall, slamming a new magazine into the breech, somehow holding them at bay. But this was impossible. We had to give up this high ground, and I had to get close enough to Mikey to agree on a strategy, hopefully to save our lives. I started to move, but Mikey, like the brilliant officer he was, had appreciated the situation and already called it. Fall back. Fall back? More like fall off the freaking mountain, that is. A nearly sheer drop right behind us. God knows how far down. But an order's an order. I grabbed my gear and took a sideways step, trying to zigzag down the gradient. But gravity made the decision for me, and I fell headlong down the mountain, completing full forward flip and somehow landing on my back, still going, heels flailing, for a foothold. At least I thought I was going fast, but Murphy was right behind me, and I could tell it was him by the bright red New York City fireman's patch he'd worn since 9/11. That was actually all I saw. "See you at the bottom," I yelled. But right then I hit a tree, and Mikey went past me like a bullet. I was going slower now, and I tried to stop, but I fell again, and I went on, catching up to Mikey now, crashing, tumbling over the ground, like we were both bouncing through a pinball machine. Ahead of us was a copse of trees on a slightly less steep gradient, and I knew this was our last hope before we plunged into the void. I had to grab something, anything, and so did Mikey, and I could see him up ahead, grabbing at tree limbs, snapping them off, and still plummeting downward. In a split second I knew that nothing could save either of us. We'd surely break our backs or necks, and the Taliban would shoot us without mercy, or as we would expect. But right now, entering the copse of trees at what felt like 70 miles an hour, my mind was in overdrive. Almost everything had been ripped away from me in the fall, everything except my ammunition and grenades, all my packs, the medical stuff, food, water, comms, phone. I'd even lost my helmet with the flag of Texas painted on it. I was damned if I wanted some fucking terrorist wearing that. I'd seen Mikey's radio aerial ripped off as we crashed downward, and that was not good. My gun strap had been ripped from me and my rifle whipped away. The trouble was, the terrain behind the tree copse was completely unknown to us, because we could not see it from above. If we had, we might have never jumped. The ground just swept upward and then ducked away downward, inverted, like a goddamn ski jump. I rocketed up the lip of the back slope, making about 80 knots on my back, feet first. In the air, I made 2 complete backflips and landed again, feet first, on my back, still coming down the cliff face like a howitzer shell. And at that moment, I knew there was a God. First of all, it appeared not to be dead, which was right up there with Jesus walking on water. But even more amazing was I could see my rifle not 2 feet from my right hand, as if God himself had reached down and given me hope. "Marcus," I heard him say, "you're going to need this." At least I think I heard him. In fact, I swear to God I heard him, because this was a miracle, no doubt in my mind, and I had not even had time to say my prayers. I didn't know how far we'd fallen, but it must have been 200 or 300 yards, and we were both still going very fast. I could see Mikey up ahead, and I honestly did not know whether he was dead or alive. It was just a person crashing through the dirt and boulders. If he had not broken every bone in his body, that, too, was a miracle. Me, I was too battered to hurt. I could still see my rifle tumbling down beside me. That rifle never strayed more than 2 feet from my hand throughout this death-defying fall, and I had always known it guided by the hand of God, because there was no other explanation. We hit bottom, both of us landing with terrific impact, like we jumped off a goddamn skyscraper. It shook the wind out of me, and I gasped for breath, trying to work out how badly injured I was. My right shoulder hurt, my back hurt, and on one side of my face the skin had been more or less scoured away. I was covered in blood and bruised to hell. But I could stand, which was actually a really bad idea, because then the RPGs began to arrive, landing close, and I went down again. They exploded more or less harmlessly, but sent up clouds of dust, shale, and wood shards from the trees. Mikey was next to me, maybe 15 feet away. We picked ourselves up from the ground. He still had his rifle strapped on. Mine was resting at my feet. I grabbed it, and I heard Murphy shout through the din of explosions, "You good?" I turned to him, and his entire face was black with dust. Even his goddamn teeth were black. You look like shit, man. And I told him, fix yourself up. I'll pause for a second while the dogs bark, and then I'll come back to finish.